Hello, welcome to another episode of Volteface TV. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Princeharry's recent disclosures around his use of cocaine, psychedelics and cannabis, and asking the question, how useful are those disclosures in helping to support further calls for drug policy reform in the UK? While you're here, please like and subscribe for more content. We really appreciate everyone's support of the channel and the shows that we're doing so far. So please, if you like what we're doing and want to see more, please like and subscribe. So these comments took place on Saturday during an event with Dr. Gabor Mate, which is a name you'll be very familiar with if you're interested in global drug policy reform. Dr. Mate, being a psychiatrist who's done loads and loads of work in this area, is a really well-regarded addiction specialist. So it's no surprise that the conversation with Dr. Gabor Mate kind of honed in on Harry's experiences and views on psychedelics and cannabis. So what did Harry actually say? Well, with regards to cocaine, he said, it didn't really do anything for me. It was more of a social thing. It gave me a sense of belonging and probably also made me feel a little different to the way I was feeling. Cannabis, though, he said that actually did really help me. With regards to psychedelics, Harry said, it was the cleansing of the windshield, removal of life's filters. It removed for me and brought a sense of relaxation, release, comfort, a lightness that I managed to hold on to for a period of time. For me, I started doing it recreationally and then started to realize how good it was for me. I would say it's one of the fundamental parts of my life that changed me and helped me deal with the traumas and pains of the past. Pretty powerful admissions there and reflections from Harry. You know, cannabis is kind of saying it actually really did help me, but psychedelics, you know, one of the most important parts, one of the most important changes that he's experienced in his life with regards to dealing with pain and trauma. So it doesn't come as a huge surprise because we know from the book that came out, Spare, that he kind of disclosed in there that he'd used drugs. And to be fair, Harry was kind of always known as someone who was a little bit of a party boy and would go out. So his use of recreational drugs is not hugely surprising. But here we've got a very strong statement around the medicinal benefits of psychedelics. But what we're interested in is what is the impact of that? Is this a good thing? Does this help us? Or does it hold us back and hinder us? But to answer that question, we kind of need to think a little bit about how do you change people's minds? Because that's what we're interested in here. We're interested in examining people that are against psychedelic cannabis reform. How do these sort of things and statements affect them? Do they move them along and bring them forward on a journey, or do they move them back? Or do they have no effect? But to answer that, I think it's important to kind of share some of my reflections of working in drug treatment for so long and share some of the things that I've spoke to students about over the years around changing people's opinions and moving people from a position of disagreement to a position of supporting. So to really understand how helpful Harry's comments are, first of all, we got to scale it all the way back and think about, well, how do you change someone's mind? Drug policy is definitely a controversial subject. It invokes moral reactions in it, strong moral reactions in people. It's not just like cycling reform or some other area of policy. Drug reform is slightly different. So when we're thinking about drug policy, we really have to get right back down to the basics of how do you change people's opinions? We've got a cohort of society that already support drug reform. We don't really need to focus on them. They're on board, they support it, they would vote yes at a ballot box for a party that was saying they were going to legalise cannabis. You know, they would vote yes on a referendum. But we also have a big chunk of society who are definitely against it, who are fearful. Now, there are less of them than there are people that support it. We know that over 50% of people in the UK support cannabis legalisation, but there is still a decent chunk that we need to think about and engage with when it comes to cannabis and psychedelics. So a really good place to start is to think about, how do we change people's minds then? How do we change people in the population to agree with more evidence-based drug policy reform in the UK? Now, I'll give you a clue. Unfortunately, it's not through evidence. So our instinct and our intuition is to go, oh, this is really easy. Just show people the truth about, you know, show them some research and evidence that shows that cannabis reform would reduce, you know, the ease by which young people can access it. Criminal gangs would make less money, would be able to make money from taxation. It would create jobs, create industry. Just show people that. That doesn't work. It's our instinct and it feels like it should work. How does the presentation of evidence not change someone's opinion? But it just doesn't. And it doesn't work in drug treatment. When I used to spend years and years sat in front of people trying to help them navigate, you know, less problematic patterns of drug use, it didn't work there. I couldn't just sit opposite someone and say, why don't you just stop using or use less, because you are losing your leg and it's going to fall off and you're probably going to experience significant harm in the next few years if you don't stop taking this drug. They would just say, well, they would think they just don't understand. You don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand my experience. You're oversimplifying a complex problem. They would reject you and push you away. Now, if someone is ready to engage, if you think about educational settings, evidence is great. If I said I was going to do a lecture next week in London about why, cannabis is safer than alcohol and we should reform our drug laws, most people that turned up have already agreed anyway. So at the end of the lecture, if I was like, does everybody agree? And they all went, yeah, that's not a sign of my success. That's just a sign of me getting people who already agree with me to turn up in a room. I don't want any of those people, really. I want the people who are like, I don't want to go to that because I think cannabis is dangerous and morally wrong. And I don't think we should legalize it. That's the group we're focused on, the deeply entrenched group. So how do you change their positions? Well, it's not just by telling them that they're wrong, unless you can get them in an educational environment, which is exceptionally unlikely. The way you work with them is by standing alongside them and helping them to better understand the situation by looking at the world through their eyes. I always refer back to the allegory of the cave. So I talk a lot about the allegory of the cave when I'm lecturing and speaking to students. And I used to talk about this a lot when I worked in drug treatment. Basically, if you imagine a cave of people, these people have lived in the cave their entire life, and they sit in the cave, and on the walls of the cave, they see the reflections of people that walk past with staffs. And those staffs are being hit by the sun and casting a reflection across the wall. Those reflections are quite scary. They show shapes of dragons and mythical beasts. And the people in the cave think, wow, it's really scary and dangerous outside. We're absolutely not going there. We're very happy in our cave, though. We can get by. We can survive here in this cave. This is fine. Now, if the people from the outside world just came into the cave and said, you guys really should just leave the cave. It's completely fine out there. You're completely wrong. It's just the sun reflecting on these staffs that people are walking past. The people in the cave would probably just kill you. They'd be like, what? No, you're trying to tempt us out and you're just going to kill us out there. They'd kill you and attack you. They wouldn't respond very well to you just saying their whole world, your entire worldview and belief system is completely wrong. I'm right. Just follow me. It wouldn't work. They would get very stressed. They would get very fearful. They would find you very suspicious. And that's much like just trying to tell someone that they're wrong on drug policy. If you just get someone sat down, try this, I can guarantee this is how it'll go. Go find a social conservative, sit them down and say, you're totally wrong about cannabis. We should legalize it. Less people will use it. Less young people will use it. It'll actually make it safer. We'll create tax industry. They will literally just have comments for all of those saying, no, don't believe you. Total nonsense. Of course you're saying that. Not going to have it. It's the same thing as going in the cave and saying, you should just leave the cave. Like, just walk out the cave. You'll be absolutely fine. It doesn't work. So what does work? Well, if you went into the cave and sat with them and said, listen, what's it like in the cave? How's cave life? What's going on? What do you think those things are on the wall? What is outside? And instead, rather than just trying to tell them that they're wrong and point your finger at them, you took them on a bit of a journey. And instead of just saying, nah, that's just the sun, you're just completely wrong. Instead, help them better understand what could be walking past. Educate them carefully through looking at the world as they see it. Maybe even go with some of their fears and find ways to work with the fears rather than just say, nah, you just shouldn't be afraid of it. It's absolutely nothing. That's the same tactics and techniques that work in drug reform. It's the same concepts and understanding of Socratic questioning, of motivational interviewing. It's a partnership that you form with someone to help them better navigate and understand the situation. And one of the biggest criticisms we have had of drug reform is it doesn't do that. In fact, often it does the total opposite. It just gets people together and says, you are totally wrong. Cannabis is safe. You should just legalize it. You're just wrong. It's a very aggressive way of engaging someone. And don't get me wrong, on the other side, they're more aggressive and very finger pointing and honestly could be really unpleasant to deal with. But you just meet them head on with the same kind of, nope, you're wrong. Look at the New Zealand referendum. It tried to do this. It tried to just tell the opposition that they were wrong, and it shot itself in the foot. Anyway, so what can we learn from that? We can learn that changing someone's opinion is not just by telling them that they're wrong, it's through taking them on a journey. And I could talk for many hours about what that should look like in the drug policy world and ways we can do that and ways that we can achieve it. But for this video, we want to zone in and think about Princeharry's comments. Are they useful? Are they helpful? So if we have got a base understanding that changing someone's opinion is about a process, it's educational, it's kind, it's supportive. Now insert Prince Harry's comments on top of that. I would argue that once we insert those things on top of our understanding of how he changed people's opinion, it's actually not very helpful at all. It's probably detrimental. The reason being is those people that already agree with Harry that, yes, psychedelics can be very helpful. Cannabis is for many people very helpful and are supportive of it, both medically and recreationally. They see those comments from Harry and they go, yeah, that's fine. And now the other added bit of complexity with Harry is that there is definitely an ideological divide that has occurred with him. So you have seen very traditional social conservatives and people on the right be kind of disgusted with Harry's recent manoeuvres, him writing a book that's just spoiled all this stuff about the royal family and made all these claims. For a lot of people that are very socially conservative, that to them is quite offensive and quite upsetting. They see that as shaking the institutions, the foundations of society. If you want to learn more about this, again, this is another subject we could talk about for hours. Look at the work of Jonathan Haidt. Jonathan Haidt spent years exploring what makes people different from on the left and the right. Why do good people disagree on religion and politics and all these things? And he comprehensively lays out in his work the moral pillars of the right, of social conservatives, and the moral pillars of the left. And what Harry has done definitely triggers many of those moral principles that exist on the right. Those things of kind of sanctity and degradation and stability that social conservatives want in society have been rocked by Harry's revelations and maneuvers. While people on the left, who more typically are kind of anti-monarchy, anti-elitism, they look at it and go, yeah, good on you, Harry. That's great. You're shaking up the system. People on the left typically are more progressive. So that move, the first royal to step away from the royal family and, shake and change the system. A lot of people, progressives on the left, quite like that. So we've got progressives on the left who are supportive of Harry, social conservatives on the right who are kind of anti. And then if you think about drug policy reform, it kind of mirrors that as well. So classically, cannabis reform, psychedelics reform sits very well on the left, as progressive stresses people out on the right. So unfortunately, you've kind of got two things playing against each other here. You've got someone out in public saying, actually, I found it very helpful, and just kind of bluntly telling people that, they're wrong. I found cannabis to be very helpful. Psychedelics changed my entire life. As much as I support those statements, they're not bad statements by any means, but they're kind of reflecting and saying to groups that disagree with them, you guys are wrong. There's kind of another issue that there is such a political, ideological divide with Harry. So I think that both those two things together are going to push people who are already against psychedelics and cannabis even further away, even though this is the first time we've had like a really major figure, particularly anybody in the royal family, coming out and owning and saying, yes, I've used psychedelics, I've used cannabis, and it was very helpful. So it's kind of frustrating. There's something to celebrate. There's a good thing in there. It's nice to see as someone that cares about drug policy reform, but I also don't think this is particularly helpful. You've already got people like Piers Morgan going online and going, no surprise, no wonder he's used psychedelics, because obviously, he thinks he's made all these terrible judgments. You've got all the Mail and stuff writing about it. So people are rallying up and kind of taking those camps. It is difficult, though, because I appreciate and understand that it is important for people to get out there, and own and be honest and open about their use of drugs. And he's every right. He's found cannabis and psychedelics to be helpful. He's every right to get out there and own that and just be honest. And I admire that. There are few people in the public eye who speak openly and honestly about drugs. It's just, unfortunately, I think the harsh reality is that divisive public figures aren't that helpful when it comes to drug policy reform. Particularly when the group we want to engage are so opposed to him already. And it kind of feels like a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, because I've talked for many people for many years about how it's really disappointing in the UK that there aren't enough high-profile people that come out and just own the fact that they've used drugs and talk about the medicinal benefits and just own it. We have a real lack of that in the UK, and it is a shame that we have someone with such a high profile, even though he's out of the royal family pretty much, he's still an incredibly powerful individual, a global reputation, incredibly influential, is out there talking positively about this. And there might be some good that comes of that. Maybe Prince Harry will start raising awareness of this in other ways. I just hope that if he does do that, he makes it less about himself and more about others, and provide examples that people that disagree with him can engage with and explore. Think more back to that allegory of the cave. Stand alongside someone and point them in the direction. Maybe fund and support documentaries or initiatives and campaigns that raise awareness of the great things that cannabis medicines and psychedelic medicines are doing. But if you own it as a divisive individual, it's very unlikely to have a net positive effect, particularly when you're divisive across the left-right spectrum, and the issue that you happen to be talking about is unpopular with social conservatives on the right. So it's kind of, I mentioned previously, a bit of an unfortunate mix. Anyway, that's kind of shares our main thoughts on the video. I think it's a really interesting, engaging subject to talk about and explore, and we'll be doing some more videos in the future back on the subject of how do you change people's opinion and exploring more detail about those different moral pillars that people adhere to and how you can use those pillars to change people's opinion. I feel like my brain naturally wants to start talking about and exploring, well, how do you change social conservatives' opinions, and drag up all the stuff that I lecture at universities and talk to students about, and often talk to clients, people that we work with about, you know, how do we change people's minds and bring people on a journey is a fundamental part of the work that we do, and a really, really important skill. So it's definitely something we'll be talking about more in the future. But I'd love to know what you think. You know, do you think this is just our opinion? Well, my opinion, I'll own this is just my opinion. I'm very happy to be challenged or hear other people's opinions on Princeharry's comments. You know, really welcome feedback. I love ideas, love discussion, love debate on this. So, you know, let us know what you think and get in touch. And until next time, thanks for watching. Cheers.